Hey everyone, it's Emily, and to celebrate the recent release of the Trails Through Daybreak 2 localization, I wanted to not only box the limited edition that NAS America kindly sent to me, but also talk about why the Trails series is my favorite series of all time. So this video is intended for anyone who is interested in the Trails series, from longtime veterans who are up to date with all the games, and also those who are thinking of starting their Trails journey. So I'll be sure to make this as spoiler-free as possible and really just share why this series means so much to me. So what makes the Trails series so special? Well, to put it simply, this is the longest running JRPG series that has multiple games that interconnect with one another in a very direct fashion. Unlike other franchises that are more episodic or self-contained, all these games do have some sort of purpose. As you make your way throughout all the games, it's really rewarding to see how much this world has grown and shaped, and all the reoccurring characters you get to meet along the way. And that alone, I think, is why so many Trails fans are so obsessed with this franchise. As someone who really enjoys long-form storytelling over multiple different volumes in novels as well as in TV shows, I really appreciate this about the Trails series and how they've really tackled this. Like, again, no one else really has. But they do it in a rather smart way, where they section off their very long series into multiple arcs that are more bite-sized and a bit more palatable when it comes to trying to tackle this very intimidating series. And in doing this, they kind of create some sort of consistency in the different regions that these arcs focus on. But it also allows for new players to come in the beginning of a new arc to kind of test the waters to see whether or not the series is for them. So I think the multiple arcs forming a cohesive story was a really smart play on Nihon Falcom's part. But the thing that makes this long form storytelling really work and just shine so brightly that myself and many fans have really taken to, I think has to be the characters. Now, you are introduced to so many characters throughout all the games, but somehow Nihon Falcom has made it so that you really truly enjoy and feel some sort of emotional connection to all the characters. From the different protagonists and party members to even sometimes villains, there is a lot of heart, I think, when they go and write these characters, giving them plenty of personality as well as humanity towards them. And I think as players, it makes you very empathetic to most of, if not all, the characters they've introduced throughout this entire franchise. And I also partly blame this of why my shelves back there just houses so many Trails figures, because I can't seem to help myself but buy up all the Trails figures that Nihon Falcom has collaborated with the various manufacturers to create. But coming back to the Trails universe and how the characters really, I think, play an integral part into making you emotionally attached to these games. I've talked about how a lot of the protagonists and the party members themselves play a key role in this, but also the NPCs just make such a rich world to be a part of. And you really have to commend Nihon Falcom for all the dialogue that they extensively just put in this world. Now, this is certainly a common criticism of this game, where people think that there's maybe a little bit too much dialogue going on and cutscenes and just amount of dialogue that when you interact with an NPC that comes to happen, and why this series really struggled for a long time when it came to the English localization, because it was such a difficult task to take on. But I really think that all the conversations you have with these characters and seeing them interact with one another really just make the world of Samaria just so rich in all the different areas. It really just makes you emotionally attached to all these characters, where you have to see what happens to them and where their journey is going to continue going. So I definitely encourage those who are interested in the Trails series to give it a try. One question I get all the time on social media or on this YouTube channel is people asking me where they should start. So I will say that I did start with the Trails in the Sky games. So I started with specifically Trails in the Sky FC Evolution, which was a English patched version on the PS Vita, because that wasn't officially released in English out here in the West. And honestly, I'm really glad I started there from the beginning. Now, do I recommend this for everyone to start from the beginning? Yes and no. It really depends on what sort of JRPGs you enjoy. Do you enjoy some of the more old school kind of JRPGs that have just really charming, chibi characters, interesting battle system, but maybe not as polished as what you'll see in the later games? But the first Sky game is, I think, a really good introduction to most players. Again, if you appreciate some of the more retro JRPGs out there. And that it really sets the tone of what to expect when it comes to the Trails games, and that there are very exciting highs of what happens throughout these games. And again, peak fiction is something a lot of fans like to kind of coin when it comes to talking about the plot for most of the Trails games, but it does take some time to get there. And there's something about that slow burn that I really liked with the first Sky game, to be honest. And once you kind of reach towards the end and get a better picture of what's happening on the continent that the characters you start out with kind of go through, it really just shows all the possibilities and implications of how much political unrest is in this fantasy continent. And it's really interesting how you could then see the different perspectives of the different characters and how they react to what's kind of going on throughout the world. Not to get into any spoilers, but there is also an option that if you wanted to start with the first game, you could wait for the remake, Sky First Chapter, which is coming out sometime this summer or early fall, most likely. That is being published through Gung Ho Entertainment. And while I'm very excited for the remake to happen, and it just looks gorgeous with the 3D renderings and some of the beefed up battle systems that are, of course, kind of taking from the more well-rounded and improved systems from the more recent games and inserting it into the first game. I will caution you that if you haven't played the Trails games before and you're waiting for that to be your first ever Trails experience, there's probably going to be a cliffhanger at the end of that game if it's going to be, again, kind of a one-to-one remake or remaster of the first Sky game. And we don't really know when the sequel, Sky Second Chapter, is going to come out. So you might be waiting a year, 6 months. That wait and that cliffhanger is, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. That's all I'll say. So you can definitely probably hop from Sky First Chapter remake to Sky SC on Steam or wherever else that's available and play the original version of that game. It might be a little bit jarring to go from the HD 3D renders to more of the pixelated chibi art, but that is certainly a subjective decision that I think people can make on their own. But if you don't want to play from the beginning, I think that is totally valid as well, as I kind of hinted at before, where every arc is really the beginning of a new journey, and you get to follow a new protagonist and have a more centralized journey, self-contained almost, within an arc. There are, of course, references to previous arcs and political implications and kind of cause and effect of what happens from the previous games that bleed into preceding arcs, but having 100% knowledge of all that is not necessary, in my opinion. But each arc really has its own identity. So if there's a different arc that catches your fancy that you want to maybe try first, I think that's totally okay as well. As long as you start with the first game, of course, of each arc, because otherwise you're going to be a little confused if you hop in, say, to Cold Steel 2 and skipped Cold Steel 1 altogether. But otherwise, I think starting again from one of these other arcs is perfectly fine. You may not get all the references and background of things that happened in the past that have implications for your present game, but I don't think that is such a deterrent or a bad thing necessarily. I think what's more important is that you start your Trails journey and don't let the decision paralysis of where to start really affect you from just trying these games out to see if they're your cup of tea. So I've shared this opinion before where if you start with the first game of any arc, that's totally fine. I think I said it when Crossbow games came out. You could start with Trails from Zero if you wish to play on the Switch. And because the Sky games aren't available on the Switch, and if that's your only console, I think that's totally fine to do. Again, you'll miss some of the Sky stuff, and there are characters that they're kind of expecting you to be familiar with. But it's not so much that it'll break your immersion of the game, in my opinion. There's just kind of extra stuff that as longtime fans, we really liked seeing our fan service, if you will. But again, it's not a make it or break it kind of deal breaker, in my opinion. So now that we are up to Trails Through Daybreak 2 here, I kind of wanted to share my thoughts about the recent arc and how maybe Trails Through Daybreak 1 is a good place to start, because that is the most accessible game we have out here, especially if you collect physically. And it's also has the latest technology when it comes to making these games that are out right now. And so it might be more user-friendly in many ways with quality of life features and just maybe more visually appealing to you if you enjoy modern RPGs. So Trails Through Daybreak 2 follows up from the events of what happened in the first game. So again, I won't spoil any kind of major things here, and just share the context of this box and just my overall impressions of this game, because I'm still in the middle of it. These can be quite lengthy games, but at the moment, I'm really enjoying my time. This is kind of a controversial game in that a lot of fans were not super excited when they played it before the localization came out, and there are a couple of different reasons for this. One is that the first Daybreak game had a lot of very high highs, especially when it comes to story bits of things that happen in the overall plot of this franchise. Because this is such a long running narrative of a series, kind of wanting to see where the plot is going is, I think, a lot of longtime fans what they're looking forward to. And from my understanding, because again, I haven't finished this game yet, this one doesn't move the plot forward too much at this point. And instead, it really focuses on the characters that we were introduced to in the first Daybreak game in Calvard, and kind of just understanding what is the Calvard Republic kind of facing right now, and really focusing in, I think, on more character interactions and growth in that way. However, I will say that because we don't really know what's going to happen in the future games, Neon Falcom tends to like to draw back again from what they've set up from the beginning. So I have a feeling that a lot of things that happen in this game will have further implications down the line. We just may not be aware of them yet. And what was also kind of controversial about this game was because there's so many different characters and things going on in the Calvard Republic, the party members kind of divide. And so you're not following the events of one party going around Calvard. Instead, going to be split in half, where you see some party members do one task while another one does something else. And then they eventually come together towards the end. So that different story structure that we're not really used to in the Trails games may have been a little bit off-putting for some fans, which is maybe why you've heard some negative reviews towards this game. But overall, if you enjoy the Trails games and you enjoy these characters, I think there's a lot to love in Trails Through Daybreak 2. And I'm really excited to finish up my playthrough and almost be caught up with all the games in the series, which is really amazing to say at this point. Now to get to the unboxing of Trails Through Daybreak 2 that, again, NAS America kindly sent over to me. I really enjoy the packaging that NAS America has been doing for the Trails games. And again, I'm not saying this because they sent this over to me. I have a long history of buying Trails limited editions, and there's something about these very compact packages that just really nicely fit on my shelves, and they contain items that I tend to really enjoy. So something that they've been doing for the Daybreak games is including this little slip case, which really frames a cardboard package, I think, very well. And I think the color choice and the art they chose for the outer box here is very fitting, because this game was originally called Crimson Sin when it was released in Japan. And I just really enjoy how sturdy these boxes are. They're perfect for stacking, and you have nice art on all sides of the box. So opening this up, I'll first share the game case itself. And so this is actually the standard case of the game. So if you didn't go for the limited edition, this will be what you receive. As you see here, I went with the PS5 edition. But we have the same cover art here that was on the box. And then inside, we have the disc, as well as a mini art book. Features Van on the cover there, as well as a mini soundtrack selection. So you will have a digital code on the back side of this paper slip to download the 8 songs available there. And then you'll also notice inside of the case, there is some inner artwork. So unfortunately, we no longer have the reversible cover art that NAS America used to do all the time. They actually used to run polls where fans got to vote what got on the inside reversible cover art. But overall, it's nice to see some inner box art here with some of the prominent characters featured. The box also includes a very nice steel case here that's covered in plastic. And this also features the same key art. So it's a little annoying, I'll admit, that they're kind of reusing the same assets. It'd be nice to have a little bit more variety when it comes to a lot of the art. And there's definitely plenty of key art, I think, that they could have used. But this is such an iconic scene that I could see why they wanted to use it so many times on a lot of these items. I really love it displaying the Trails steelbooks in particular because they're really attractive, especially if you have them outward facing. And inside they have a map of the Republic of Calvard that's in black and this metallic red. Next up, we have a nice art book that is hardcover. And again, going with that crimson and black theme. I'll admit it is a little on the thin side. We've definitely received much thicker art books in the past in these collector's editions, but they call this the Calvard Case Files with a prologue, some information about the world and characters and illustrations. So it would be nice if they were able to expand upon this a little bit more, but maybe they just didn't have the assets at the time, or maybe there's had to make some cuts, unfortunately, to keep this at that $100 price point that NAS America has been pretty good with when it comes to their collector's editions. But I'm always pleased whenever they include art books, and it's a little bit thicker than what was included in the mini art book that's part of the standard case release. The next we have the soundtrack, which has this vertical orientation that's just like the first Daybreak soundtrack they included in that collector's edition. Again, this features the 8 songs that you can digitally download in the standard release case, but it's nice to have a physical soundtrack, and this has a very nice holographic sheen to the package, which is very, very nice looking, actually. It's not the full soundtrack to this game, unfortunately, but Falcom always releases their soundtracks in Japan for not too much money, so I'm probably going to have to import the soundtrack whenever I could find it for a good price. The next up is this nice stack of art cards, which are nice and large. Again, we have the same key art that's been on everything first, but then we have some really nice illustrations of all the characters here that feature in this game. We have some that have returned from previous games, but also just from the Calvard Arc. And it's always cool to see them in more casual wear or in kind of different poses than how you usually see them in the game. Then the last item that's included inside of this limited edition is this nice cloth map. And this is actually the same texture that they had in the PS5 version of Cold Steel 3 and 4, that remastered package. So it has more of a rough texture to it, but you get to see the various locations throughout the Republic of Calvard and also how it borders the Liberel Kingdom, which is the area that you're first introduced to in the Sky games. So this is a really massive map that you could hang on your walls if you wanted. So it's always kind of, I think, neat to have in-game maps of JRPGs, though I do wish the material was a little bit softer to the touch. But overall, I think this is a nice limited edition that will go well with the rest of my Trails limited editions on my shelves there. So I want to, again, thank NAS America for sending this over for me to unbox for you guys. And I hope you guys also enjoyed kind of hearing me gush about my favorite franchise of all time and why Trails just means so much to me. And I love to hear from all of you. If you also enjoy the Trails game, what really makes it a special series for you. And for anyone who's interested in starting their Trails journey, also love to hear what game you plan on starting with if you haven't already done so. But that's everything for me. I hope you guys, again, enjoyed this video. And until next time, bye guys.